we are bringing our exploration of the anatomy of boundaries to a close. A journey we have made alongside the characters of 4 significant films. It began with Stanley Ipkiss in The Mask, hiding his vulnerability behind an explosive alter ego because he did not believe his real self was worthy of love. We witnessed the tragedy of Nina Sayers in Black Swan, whose inner world was completely overwhelmed by other people's ambitions and perfectionism, leading to the destruction of her personhood in service of an ideal role. In the last episode, we sat with Charlie from The Perks of Being a Wallflower, who learned, among the wreckage of childhood trauma, to build his first defenses and say the most important word: no. But a question arises. What do you do once the masks have been removed, the internal storm has quieted, and the perimeter around yourself has been drawn and reinforced? If we leave the space inside that fence empty, we risk turning into an impenetrable but completely lifeless fortress. This is precisely where Elizabeth Gilbert enters our story in Eat, Pray, Love. She begins her journey in a state of absolute deficit, at the point where the old scripts of convenient wife and socially approved success have stopped giving her any energy at all. Liz takes on something more courageous than just defending herself from external pressure. She sets out to refill her territory with genuine meaning and authentic desire. Today, we look at the final stage of working with boundaries, the transition from simply protecting your space to the art of conscious presence in your own life. Liz's first stop in Italy is not simply a culinary tour. It is a large-scale operation to reclaim her right to joy. To understand the significance of this stage, we need to remember where we started. Stanley Ipkiss in The Mask needed a magical artifact to permit himself even a flicker of drive. Nina in Black Swan turned her body into an exhausted instrument, denying herself food and rest in the pursuit of unattainable perfection. Against the backdrop of those characters, Liz commits a genuine act of psychological courage. She allows herself to experience pleasure simply for its own sake, without earning it first. This is where we encounter the concept of dolce far niente, the sweetness of doing nothing, which, for someone with broken boundaries, sounds like something frightening and forbidden. In psychology, the inability to enjoy the present moment often signals that your inner territory is still occupied by other people's voices. If when you try to rest or eat something you enjoy, you hear an internal rebuke about wasted time or unnecessary calories, your boundaries are still permeable to parental figures or social standards. Liz demonstrates that rehabilitating bodily pleasure is the foundation of personal freedom. Food in the film becomes a symbol of reclaiming control over one's own life. When she buys a larger pair of jeans, refusing to punish herself for the sake of an image, she is drawing the most important line of all: the boundary between her actual needs and the external dictate of appearance. The ability to enjoy life is the highest form of respect for your own limits, because it requires the courage to say to the world, "My state right now matters more than your expectations." If you don't allow yourself to taste life, your fence is protecting nothing but emptiness. For many of us, as for Charlie, who is accustomed to being invisible, this stage is the real challenge. We learn to understand that "I want" is not a whim. It is a navigation system pointing us toward where we are still alive. This is the magic of Liz's Italy. She stops being a function and becomes a person, reclaiming her right to take up space in the world and to draw genuine, unconditional pleasure from doing so. After rehabilitating her senses in Italy, Liz travels to India, and this stage is critical to understanding how our internal limits actually function. Where we previously talked about Charlie, who used silence as a hiding place, a way of disappearing so as not to be hurt, for Liz, the silence of the ashram becomes an instrument of active searching. This is the filtration phase. When we build an external fence, the noise of the world does not stop immediately. It continues to sound inside us in the form of introjects. Those internalized beliefs, rules, and voices of the people close to us that we mistakenly receive as our own desires. The time in India symbolizes the process of clearing the territory. Liz encounters the fact that even in complete silence, her mind keeps generating accusations. You should be productive. You let your husband down. You're selfish. These are the same mechanisms that made Stanley Ipkiss feel worthless and drove Nina Sayers to the edge of madness. But this is precisely where Liz learns to draw a boundary, not only between herself and the world, but between herself and her own thoughts. She comes to understand that she is not obliged to believe every voice in her head. This is genuine sovereignty, the ability to stop the internal noise and ask, what do I actually want, when no one is watching and no one is keeping score? Boundaries are not about learning to stay quiet. They are about making space so that your own voice can finally be heard within that quiet. For someone who has spent years being convenient and silent, this stage can be painful, because behind the interjects, there may initially be nothing but emptiness. But it is precisely in the ashram that Liz shows us. Only through that clearing can you locate your true center. Without this internal filter, any external boundary will remain a formality, because you will continue to betray yourself, obeying an internal dictator. India teaches us that the highest form of freedom is the right to your own opinion of yourself, independent of how comfortable that opinion makes the people around you. The final stop in Bali reveals Liz's most persistent weakness, her chronic dependence on external direction. We see how readily she allows other people's frameworks into her inner world. The moment early in the film when Kedut's prediction lands on unprepared ground is telling. It effectively becomes a script she begins to follow without examination. When a person lacks a stable internal center, any word from an authority figure becomes not merely advice, but a directive. In this sense, Liz is uncomfortably reminiscent of Nina in Black Swan. Where Nina was subjected to crushing external pressure, Liz voluntarily hands over the management of her life to wise guides. The same dynamic runs through her relationship with Felipe. Her anxiety is not a sign of deep self-awareness. It is a symptom of the same fragility in her limits. Liz is so afraid of losing herself again because her sense of self is still held up by external props. The most ironic and quietly sad moment of the ending is that she does not return to love through an internal awakening. She returns after another lecture from Kedut about balance. She ends the relationship, drifts, struggles, and then, the moment the mentor gives his blessing, she reverses course entirely. This leaves us with an uncomfortable question. Has she actually grown out of the role of the student? Here lies an important psychological lesson. Boundaries are not only about learning to say no to an aggressor. They are also about the ability to question the advice of even the kindest teacher. If your life is moving along the vector of someone else's prophecies, your script of freedom is still being written by someone else. Liz Gilbert at the end of the film is a character who has learned to protect her perimeter from obvious threats, but has left the gate open for anyone who seems wiser than her. She accepts the love she has been given permission to accept. And while this looks like a happy ending, for us it serves as a reminder. Genuine autonomy begins where the authority of mentors ends and your own, imperfect, uncertain, responsibility for every step you take begins. Drawing together the threads of this journey, we can see that limits are not only about defense. In the Wallflower episode, we learn to protect our resources. Through Liz Gilbert, we understand how important it is to distribute those resources consciously. The script of freedom is the ability to shift from survival mode into presence mode. To do that, we need new language formulations that communicate not simply refusal, but active choice. A way of stating your priorities so clearly that the people around you understand. Your I want carries the same weight as their you must. The practice of filling your boundaries begins with stopping the habit of apologizing for your own needs, converting them from apparent weakness into a deliberate stance. Instead of agonizing over a socially acceptable reason to say no, try using I statements that explain the value of your space. For example, when the people closest to you need your attention at a moment when you are emotionally depleted, instead of "I can't, I'm busy," you might say, "Right now, I really need an hour of quiet to restore my balance so that I can actually be present with you afterward." In professional situations, when someone tries to offload responsibility onto you, instead of a flat, "That's not my job," something like this tends to land better. "I'm focusing on this task because it's where I can actually be useful right now. Spreading myself thin won't serve either of us well." Even in small things, choosing food, choosing how to spend your time, it helps to practice saying, "I'm choosing this because it's what I actually need right now," without waiting for anyone's approval. What all of these formulations share is this: they are grounded in the right to be yourself and to take up space. They don't build walls between you and other people, they create transparency. You are showing the people around you the instruction manual for how to be with you, based on honesty rather than convenience. The entire arc we have traveled, from Stanley's explosive mask and Nina's self-destruction, through Charlie's tentative first no, to Liz's searching, leads us to a single understanding. Limits do not make us lonely. They make our presence in other people's lives genuine and meaningful. When you stop being convenient and start being real, you communicate to the world what kind of love and what quality of relationship you actually deserve. The script of freedom is the right to be the author of your own desires, without waiting for a mentor's permission or a fortune teller's sign. It is the understanding that your inner garden belongs to you, and only you decide what grows there. In the end, protecting your boundaries means protecting the life inside yourself. As we close this series, it is worth sitting with one thing. The path back to yourself does not always look like a beautiful journey around the world. Sometimes it looks like Stanley's painful shedding of a familiar role. Sometimes it looks like Nina's agonizing emergence from under the weight of someone else's control, too late, at too high a cost. We have seen that boundaries are not a static fence. They are a living process. First, we learn to notice where we are being suppressed. Then we take the first steps toward protecting ourselves, the way Charlie did. And finally, we learn the art of filling our life with meaning, even if, like Liz, we still occasionally need a prompt from outside. The central lesson of all these stories is simple. No one is coming to hand you your freedom. No mask, no mentor, no chance-traveling companion will build your inner home for you. This is daily work, the ongoing writing of your own script of freedom, where every yes to your own desires and every firm no to someone else's pressure is another brick in the foundation of who you are. Remember, you accept the love and the treatment that, in your deepest sense of yourself, you feel you deserve. Allow yourself to deserve the very best, a life without false images, without self-destruction, and without the fear of claiming what is yours. If this series has helped you look at your own limits, and at some of your favorite films with fresh eyes, leave a like and subscribe. There are many more psychological deep dives into cinema ahead, and we will keep looking for answers to the questions that actually matter. Write in the comments whose story resonated with you most: Stanley, Nina, Charlie, or Liz. See you in the next one.